Hello, my friends. Unfortunately, today we continue to receive bad news from the front. It's reported that on the Pokrovsk direction, Ukrainian forces have started to retreat as the situation is rapidly worsening. Ukrainian soldiers are gradually pulling back from their positions in the areas of Novopavlivka and Sukhyi Yar, Myrnohrad direction. As a result, reports began to appear claiming that the Russians have captured Lysivka. This may have happened because Ukrainian forces withdrew from their positions, allowing the Russians to move in and fortify them. But for now, this information is unofficial. If you want to know the official update regarding the Pokrovsk direction, Commander in Chief Syrskyi made a statement. The armed forces of Ukraine have several action plans for the Pokrovsk area, said Syrskyi. Of course, there is also a plan B and plan C for all possible developments. According to him, Russia has concentrated around 50,000 troops in the Pokrovsk area. However, the intensity of attacks has slightly decreased and the situation remains under control. Overall, France will have to wait and see how the situation develops further. Still, if we look at the geolocation map, we can see that the Russians claim to be advancing near Lysivka and Sukhyi Yar, and the gray zone there has expanded. We also already know that Russian forces are moving toward the village of Rivne, and Ukrainian fighters on the ground basically confirm this information. And the Russians have claimed that 95% of Pokrovsk is under their control. The Russian army took complete control of the Dinas district and advanced along the H-32 motorway, seizing the electrical substation and entering the locality of Rivne from the south. In addition, fighting began near the postal company and in the suburb of Kokhoshine. 95% of the city of Pokrovsk is under Russian control. Further south, the Russian forces captured the first trench systems north of Lysivka, which has been cleared after the Ukrainian army withdrew from the area. We can also see that the ray zone in the Myrnohrad has expanded. Ukrainian fighters are sharing videos showing how they're destroying Russian troops there. The Russians have already fortified themselves in the outer apartment buildings, and it seems that the Russians managed to break into this area specifically through Krasny Leman. And now let's move on to the Dobropillia direction. Here the Russians continue assaulting Suvorove, Nikanorovka, Volodymyrivka, and Sofiyivka. However, they've had no success so far, and the Ukrainian forces have managed to repel all attacks. So for now, there is no information about new Ukrainian counteroffensive actions in this area. In the Novopavlivka direction, the Russians have increased the activity and are trying to break through near Kotlarivka and Horihove, advancing across the fields toward Filia, with additional attacks recorded near Zeleny High. However, no new changes have been reported over the past day. So far, all Russian attempts to advance toward Novopavlivka have been repelled, and the front line remains unchanged. In the Pokrovske direction in the Dnipropetrovsk region, Russian forces are advancing toward Novoselivka and assaulting Sosnivka, Orestopil, Yegorivka, Rybne, and Uspenivka. Although for 2 consecutive days there have been multiple claims that the latter 2 villages have already fallen under Russian control. This information hasn't yet been officially confirmed, and therefore we are waiting for official updates. In the Huliaipole direction, Russian forces are trying to break through near Novopavlivka and Novouspennivske. Shelling continues, and the situation is gradually worsening, although there have been no new frontline changes over the past day. However, since the front is slowly collapsing in both the Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhzhia regions, a new wave of evacuations has already been announced. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, the Russians are advancing toward the outskirts of Primorske and Shalyan Orikhiv. But so far, they haven't achieved significant success over the past day, and the front line remains unchanged. In the Kherson direction, Russian forces continue the attacks near the Antonievsky Bridge and are heavily shelling the right bank. But the Ukrainian forces are successfully repelling all assaults, and the front line remains stable. Now let's move to the Kostantinivka direction. Here, the Russians are trying to advance near the villages of Klebanbyk and Yablonivka. The activity has slightly decreased again, and no new successes have been recorded for the Russians in this area. In the Kramatorsk direction, the Russians are trying to advance across the fields toward the village of Previlla. However, they haven't achieved any significant success so far, and Ukrainian forces continue to destroy the assaults, so the front line remains unchanged. In the Siversk direction, Russian troops are assaulting Yampil and Dronivka, pushing towards Siversk and advancing in the areas of Vyimka and Fedorivka. The activity remains high, but there have been no changes along the front line as the Ukrainian forces continue to repel all attacks. In the Leman direction, Russian activity has slightly decreased, but the Russians are still assaulting Zarychne, Drobasheva, and Korovy Yar. Ukrainian soldiers describe the situation as follows. Leman direction. The Russians have moved through Seredny and are already securing positions toward Korovy Yar. From Chandrogolove, Russian forces advanced in two directions, along both the eastern and western banks of the Nitrus River. It's clear that their goal is to bypass Novoselivka from the northeast. Unfortunately, our defense along the Nitrus didn't hold for long. The Russian next maneuvers will likely aim at reaching the large forest area bordered by the Syrskyi Donets River on one side, the Oskil River on another, and the city of Izum on the third. The Russians will also attempt to capture the village of Yarova and move to the northern bank of the Syrskyi Donets. That would completely isolate our Leman bridgehead, after which the Russians would begin destroying the crossings with aerial bombs and trying to infiltrate to the other bank in small groups. Overall, the situation along this entire direction remains difficult, although Ukrainian forces managed to slow the Russian advance somewhat over the past 2 weeks. It hasn't been completely stopped. As we can see, even though the Russians haven't made new gains today, the overall situation in this direction remains very serious. Meanwhile, in the Borova direction, the Russians are not carrying out new assaults, and the situation here remains stable for now. In the Kupyansk direction, the Russians are assaulting Petropavlivka and attempting to break through near Peshchane. Street fighting continues in Kupyansk itself, but the front line hasn't changed so far. In the Velykyi Burluk direction, the Russians are assaulting Dvorichanske and pushing toward Kolodezne, but they have made no progress and the front line remains unchanged for the past day. In the Kharkiv direction, the situation remains calm with only shelling reported. However, in the Vovchansk area, activity is very high. In addition to offensive actions in Vovchansk itself, the Russians are assaulting Sinelnikova. Fighting is also ongoing near the villages of Tykhe and Vovchansky Hutory. So far, there have been no changes in the front line over the past day, but the Russians have managed to occupy new positions and are trying to build on their gains. We are waiting to see how the situation develops. In the Sumy direction, the Russians have also slightly increased the activity. They are attempting breakthroughs near Kostiantynivka, and attacks have been recorded near Andriivka and Oleksiivka, as well as near Varachine and Yunakivka. However, there have been no changes over the past day, and all attacks are being successfully repelled. And the weekly summary of the fighting is out. According to foreign analysts, over the past 7 days, Russian forces have managed to capture 79 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory. If we include the gray zone, it's 107 square kilometers. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian forces have managed to liberate only 3 square kilometers or 4 square kilometers, including the gray zone. So gradually, territory is continuing to fall under the Russian control. However, Zelensky said that Putin is in a dead-end situation and the Russians have no real success on the battlefield.
It seems to me that he is in a dead end regarding real battlefield success. The situation is more like a stalemate for him, because for us it is very difficult. But we are at home defending our land. Society is defending itself. The military is defending, and the body of the state is defending itself against this pressure. But he has a different story first. He has radically prepared his society for this information-wise. Second, he promised certain goals, and he did not achieve them. And so he needs to show some achievements.
Besides Frontline, fighting shelling continues actively, and last night the Russians struck Sumy region again. The attack damaged infrastructure facilities, the mayor Oleg Stogny reported. So you can see. There are also reports of explosions and a fire overnight in Jankoy in Crimea. The strike hit a power substation. In Crimea, reports say that Jankoy 330 kilowatt substation was struck. This key energy node is used to connect and distribute power along the 330 kilowatt overhead line Melitopol-Jankoy-Simferopol, which supplies electricity to a large part of the peninsula. In this way, Ukraine is also attempting to target and degrade Russia's energy infrastructure. Zelensky said that Russians don't really want Ukrainian land. They want to destroy Ukraine.
I don't think their goal is simply to take land. Nobody is strong enough for that yet. They want to apply pressure, to do damage, to gain some additional benefit for themselves. Against Ukraine, the benefit for them would be to stop Ukraine's development, to destroy identity, and so on. I'm skeptical that they just want territory. They already have large lands. It's more about political gains.
Friends, share your thoughts about this in the comments. Zelensky also said the Europeans are very afraid of escalation.
I think it's not Europe that is at war with Russia. Russia is at war with Ukraine, and potentially with many in Europe. We understand what they're capable of and what they can do, but Europe is very afraid of the word escalation. They are always worrying that any European response, since they are developed states that respect law and values, will be labeled escalation. I think the opposite. Russia dislikes weakness, and it sees any intellectual, non-military response, like sanctions or other non-force measures, as weakness.
Friends, if you agree with this, be sure to write your thoughts in the comments. And that's all from me. So please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.